So let's dive right in. I want to hear the journey of you as a player. First off, take me back to your childhood days and kind of where you got started, whatever sports you were into back then.
Yeah, so I played baseball, I played basketball, I played soccer. Golf was the last thing I got into. Um, Played tennis a little bit. And I think my most fond memories, like growing up playing baseball, because that's what I played the most up until like third grade. That's when we got to play basketball for the first time,
Okay.
and got hooked on that. It was just like Saturday mornings. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
Um, and then like fifth and sixth grade, that's when we first had practices.
Okay.
We'd have like 2 weekday, like Tuesday, Thursday practices. I always remember our coach would try to entice us to make 10 out of 10 free throws. And if we made 10 out of 10, he'd get us a candy bar of our choice.
Okay.
And in today's standard, that's probably not okay, but that was motivation certainly for me, was motivation to work on my free throws because I wanted that candy bar.
Yeah. That's great.
And then, so we played fifth and sixth grade. Seventh grade, I tried out for the middle school team and I didn't make it. And that was devastating. And I went down to the rec and played for the year there. And then tried it again in eighth grade. And we had a really, really fun time, middle school. And then I got to high school basketball and we had 3 coaches in 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Which was a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah. We replaced coach after freshman year and after my sophomore year. And I had the same coach junior and senior year.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was like the basketball journey. And then like the golf journey, I started playing my freshman year in high school. And it's one of those sports that like I just became a sponge and I got better pretty quickly. And when I graduated from high school, I had the opportunity to go over to UNH and to walk on the team there. And of course I got there and they cut the program. So we played 1 year. We played the last year that they were Division I. I got to play on the team.
Okay.
And then from there we started it as a club. I played I think I played 2 more years. Well, I started my third year and then I decided I was going to get into coaching.
Okay. Nice.
So that's great. That's kind of my sports journey.
That's a good timeline. So 2 things I wanted to circle back to. The third grade basketball. Did you stop playing baseball at the point when you found basketball, or did you just kind of take a seasonal focus approach there?
Seasonal approach. Still love playing baseball. I played that through. I wanted to stop playing baseball when I was 13, and my mom made me play 13 through 15. She's like, you need another sport. You can't just do one thing.
Sure.
And I don't know. I kind of wish I had picked up golf in that time, but like my family didn't play golf. My dad doesn't play. My mom didn't play. I had cousins that played, but there was just no like support system for that.
Right. It's not a very common entry point for the young teen years for golf.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so still was playing baseball, but really liked basketball. And I think shortly thereafter, like I got a basketball hoop for Christmas, which is great.
Yeah.
Go outside and shoot hoops was awesome.
Yeah. The reason I asked is I had a very similar timeline. I played only baseball up until age 9 and then found basketball. And I was like, forget this baseball thing. I'm just all in on the basketball, like all the time. And kind of never looked back.
I think I think baseball and hockey kind of lend themselves to that. Like you have to start early and you have to stay at it. And then I think both sports get really hard.
Yeah.
And I feel like basketball starts out hard and in some ways gets easier. And I don't mean that basketball isn't hard, but like you struggle to make a hoop, but then you get taller and then it becomes easier to make a hoop.
For sure.
So then you're challenging yourself to go further back and you can't make a hoop. But then eventually it becomes easier to make that hoop because you're stronger.
Right. I also think of it as just more room for error too. Like it's so fast paced, there's so much change going on. Like, hey, you miss a layup, you make an error, whatever, you get it back. Whereas baseball, it's like it's really, really slow until it's like crunch time, and like you make an error and you blew the whole game with that one error. And so
no, definitely.
I think it's it's interesting contrast of sports. The second point that really caught my attention was that 7th grade year. Like you didn't make the middle school team, you went and played with the rec, and like what did you experience like over that next year that had you making it on the 8th grade team after that?
I think the big thing was that we had a coach. We had a couple coaches that had experience coaching. I feel like they had coached like middle school ball previously, so like they were keeping things as normal or as rigid as would a middle school team be. So we were getting the necessary skills, and they were highly skill driven, less gameplay and more like I don't know. They used to have this drill. He called it like truck and trailer. It was like you throw it ahead and then you had to sprint ahead and get it, and then you threw it ahead again and the next guy had to sprint ahead and get it. Things like that. So it was a lot of ball handling. So I think that helped. And then I probably grew some because I was tiny.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
And just it was like a good lesson. Like there's never a thought that I wasn't gonna keep playing. It was just like, just got to work harder and got to like be a sponge.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Like that's our number one candidate for working with our program is a 7th grade player that like missed their tryout, and they're like, stuff just got real, and now I gotta go do something about it if I want to keep playing. And often, the leverage impact zone is like kind of how I think about it. Like they see the future and they see what they're missing, and suddenly the motivation just shoots up, and you can make a whole lot of progress in less than a year's time. Really,
it's like that. It's that like 7th, and then I think again like anywhere in that between 7th and like 10th grade, like a lot can happen, and you just can't. Like if I always say to kids, like if you love basketball, then you'll continue to play. Yeah. Like if you're like you don't make the team and then you decide, well, I'm not going to play anymore, then you really don't love basketball.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's a game that you can play into your. I mean, gosh, there's guys that play pick up ball in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah, exactly. That's I always look at it like I want to make it a lifetime love of sport, like I have. Like once you get at age 13 because you missed that team and like you're burned out or whatever. I totally agree. Like probably the second crisis point where we find players is like they missed their freshman tryout, and like again they're super motivated. Like I just saw a vision of what high school basketball looks like and what I'm missing, and now I got really specific stuff to work on. And where you can make them progress.
And there's always like, I mean, I don't want to get in too much because I don't know what questions you have coming, but like as a coach, there's always reasons. There can be reasons why you didn't make a team one year and you might make it the next year. And it could be just like, there's we had a situation this past year where we kept a bunch of freshmen. And we had like 7 or 8 freshmen on the JV team. And so that allowed more kids to make it maybe than a typical year. And you can't ever compare yourself to other players that you think, well, I'm better than this kid, but he's a year younger than me, or a year older than me, and he made the team, so I should make the team. Like it doesn't work that way per se. But you got to keep working.
Right.
Can't get comfortable.
Right. It's often a bigger picture systematic thing of program numbers, like you're saying, that caused you to be on the cutting block that year. So it's not always I guess don't take it personal is how I usually approach it with players. Like just like make it undeniable, right? be
Right.
so good they can't ignore you is kind of my approach.
That's it. If
Yeah.
I'm not, if you're clearly one of the top players, like
Yeah.
I'm not sending you away. That's just not happening.
And no coach will, despite players and parents' protestation to the contrary. It's like, if you're good enough, like, you will play. And that's
Yep.
just getting there.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's get into more of the coaching journey. You said, after your after UNH golf years, you got into coaching. Were you coaching some golf, or was it right into coaching basketball?
I was actually coaching basketball. So it was my junior year at UNH. I got asked by Dover High if I would be interested in helping with the basketball program, specifically helping coach the freshman team.
Okay.
And it was kind of a situation where they kind of knew that I was interested in coaching, and they didn't necessarily have the means to pay me to coach.
Sure.
But they were also offering a spring coaching position, coaching tennis.
Okay.
So it was kind of like, if you do this will be looked favorably, and we'll take care of you in that way.
We might pay you later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So that was how I got into it, and it was a tough conversation with my coach at UNH, where I said, thank you for the 2.5 years I've been here, but I have this opportunity to coach, and I think long term that's maybe the direction I want to go in. And he totally understood. He was very supportive of it, and that's what I did. So I continued on as a student at UNH.
Golf coach at UNH. You basically said you're walking away from the golf program in order to coach basketball. Wow.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so that's what I started coaching basketball. Did tennis that spring, and then shortly thereafter, I started helping out with the golf program.
Okay.
And I went on. At one point, I coached all three for, I think it was 11 seasons. Wow. And then when my son Desmond was born, I said, I'm going to go, this last year, I've got to give up something. My wife was like, ultimatum, you got to give up something. And that was a smart decision. Like, I just couldn't continue to do it. I think she was hoping I would give up basketball because that's the most time consuming. But I chose to give up tennis.
Okay.
And yeah, so I continue to coach the basketball team and the golf teams at Dover High.
Okay.
It'll be my 24th year in the basketball program. And I think it'll be my 22nd year in the golf program.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So talk me through your progression then from, being the unpaid volunteer freshman coach. Yep. Like how'd you move up to eventually being the head coach?
So the coach at the time was relieved of their duties after my the first year I did, and Coach Mike Romps came in the second year, and I was all lined up to coach the freshman team. And I had this little thing. It was like my last 2 weeks of school at UNH, and I wasn't going to be able to make like any of the practices. And so they kept me on. I wasn't going to be able to do the freshman job full time. So I stayed on as a program assistant. I did that for, must have been 4 years, helping the varsity, wherever it needed, mainly the varsity and JV. And then I became the JV coach, and I was JV coach under Coach Romps for 16 years. And then when he stepped down, I applied for the head job, and that was a long process. Like, he stepped down June 15th, and I think I interviewed, and then I didn't hear for must have been 6 weeks. I started wondering, what the heck? Am I not going to get this job? I know there were a lot of great candidates. I remember walking out of the room and seeing a lot of coaches from the area that I knew, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be difficult. But ended up getting that job, and if math serves me correctly, this will be my 7th year as the head coach.
Yeah.
So that'll be, yeah, it's been really interesting. And going from an assistant, I think I have all the like the perspectives of like, what it's like to be an assistant coach in the program, having been a JV coach, now a varsity coach. I think I now get the entirety of what players are experiencing and what coaches are experiencing.
Yeah. No, that kind of longevity going through all the levels of programming. Like honestly, being a JV coach for 16 years, there's not too many guys that stick around and do that, right? They're always looking to jump off and go to a smaller school to be the head coach.
Yeah, I had opportunities. There were a couple opportunities over the years, and I don't know that I ever thought I would end up as the head coach. I was really comfortable being, assistant coach and JV coach, because there's just so many other aspects to being the varsity coach that I didn't realize.
Sure.
And it's, it doesn't stop. It's fall. In the fall you're trying to organize, open gyms, or if you have enough guys that have interest in a league, and then you're getting into the season. The season is, we give the kids 6 days a week, but it's like 7 days a week for us as coaches. And then, you get like April and May off, and then June you're starting back with open gyms, and then we play in 2 leagues, and that'll wrap up this week. So you get August off, and then it's kind of back to it. So it's like, it's more, when I was the JV coach, I could really, come in the day the season started, and, be there when it ended, and then pop in a couple times in the summer.
Sure.
So yeah, but I've enjoyed it. It's a good challenge, and we've certainly had highs and lows in that role.
Yeah.
But it's rewarding. I think that's why I continue to do it, is just like trying to help kids, try to make it a really positive experience. It doesn't, they may not think it's positive because they expect to win every game and win the championship. But, from my playing time, which was really, I call it the dark years, where you just had, so much upheaval of coaches and no success at all. I try to be mindful of that, and like, how can I make this a positive experience? Not everybody's going to go undefeated and win a championship, but how can you make it a positive, learning experience and positive environment that they can look back and say, that was good, and I learned this or that about myself. And yeah, that's kind of, I think, what my mission is.
Yeah, that's great. One question I like to ask when you've had that kind of longevity is, how do you approach each year and keep it fresh and, prevent it from being, stale and burning yourself out kind of thing?
Well, I think that the nature of it is that, like, you just have different kids cycling through, and that becomes exciting. There's just, a player will grow. They'll go from 5'7" to 6'3", and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, like they can jump a lot higher. So then you start to imagine, like, oh, we could run these plays, and we could do this. And, there are times I come out of a season and I'm like, gosh, defensively we were okay, but if we could do X, Y, or Z offensively, we might be able to compete at a little higher level. So that makes, then you're exciting, and then you're talking, we have a text chain going with the coaches in which what if we did this? What if we did that? And then all of a sudden you went from kind of down on the next year to like, well, actually we could be okay. Like, if we did these things. Try not to make changes on both ends of the floor. So like, we may change our defensive philosophy a little bit. And so if that's the case, then we may not touch the offense. But, there are years where we're like, we've got to just overhaul what we're doing offensively because we really struggled. And, that becomes the emphasis, and defensively we'll just take what we've been doing and be okay with it. But the kids make it, you get a kid that, maybe sat the bench as a junior committed themselves in the off season to working on their game, got a lot better before their senior year, and they want to take on a bigger role, and they're more vocal, and maybe they pulled along a couple of other kids, and that becomes exciting. Like you can feel it as a coach, and you want to match their intensity and interest.
Yeah.
Um,
That's great. And then how do you balance the the consistency of year to year for a long-term program like you've had, the system that you have kind of in the background compared to adapting, like you're just talking about the personnel year to year changes that you have going on?
So that's been the hardest. That's been the biggest obstacle, and in large part because of COVID.
Sure.
I felt like we were in a really good spot right before COVID. Just felt like it was things were starting to take hold at like the middle school, and we just had players that just really were like intense about basketball. And then kind of COVID happened, and in Dover, the city made the decision not to allow any basketball in the city at any level. So no rec ball, no JV, no freshman basketball. It was just varsity basketball.
Okay.
And that really reset everything for us.
Yeah.
Because if you don't play for a year, that just the development at every level was set back.
Yeah.
We feel like we are starting to get that back. It's been a slow process. We have 1 year. It would be kids that would have been in, I think, 8th grade would be juniors now. I think we have like 3 kids left in the program, and it's not because there wasn't talent, but they just hadn't worked at it.
Yeah.
They hadn't been given that opportunity to have somebody tell them, hey, you need to get better at your left hand dribble, or your being shot ready, things like that.
Sure.
So, but we've been able to have some consistency with our JV coach, with our reserves coach. So that's always helpful. Middle school, same thing. So we've got some continuity building over the last 3 years. I think that helps if they know where you're looking to get them at the varsity level. They bring that into the younger levels, trying to emphasize skills at the younger levels, and then more team play as you go up.
Yeah.
It's kind of where we're at.
That's great. Any program I've ever seen that had really high level sustained success has that continuity, like you just said. Like the middle school coach has to be talking to the varsity coach once in a while and understand the same concepts, terminology, philosophy. Otherwise, I just see the kids getting yo-yoed, year to year. Every coach got a completely different system and philosophy, and
that's hard.
Varsity team, and it's like you're starting from scratch as the head coach, and it's really hard to build anything with that. So
and it's hard. Like you've dealt with so many kids over the years, and like they want, the kids and their families want success, and they define success as winning. But it's not about that. You don't want to be in a situation. I just had one of my players say to me the other night, as I'm saying, hey, you need to work on your right hand. And they say to me, well, I'm not really comfortable dribbling because all the way through youth ball, they made me play center.
Yeah.
Like, well, but that's not going to help us be successful.
Right.
So great that you won games in 5th and 6th grade with you as the center. Yeah. But I would rather have you guys lose games, but you handle the ball a little bit so we could win later on.
Yeah.
I think that's tough, and getting everybody on the same page is important for that.
Yeah, right. Having the long-term view. I think in a lot of ways it has to be driven by the man at the top, right? It's like, I see these kids, 10 years from now, this is what happens. Like, this guy won't dribble because he was taught that in 5th grade. So yeah, I think
I say to the coaches a lot that I read it a long time ago, and I think it's true. 75% of your 8th grade team won't play on the varsity.
Yeah.
So like that's the reality of it. So but we don't know who that is.
Right. Right.
So you have to coach each one like they're going to be on the varsity.
Right.
And we've seen it. We oftentimes share stories, and the stories we share aren't about guys that are like Ty Vico, who scored 20 points a game. They're more about the stories about guys that were, we slotted them in as the 13th player on the team, and by the end of the year they were starting, and that kid didn't make the middle school team in 7th grade or 8th grade.
Right.
And yet he's starting in a state championship game.
Yeah.
And that's the success I see, is and all credit to that player who just kept working his tail off.
Yeah. Playing the long game as coaches and really getting that across, and allowing all the younger levels to be okay not having a championship, not even having a winning season necessarily. It's like getting them to come back and keep engaged and keep growing. It's really that compound interest effect over a lot of years of playing.
Yep. Trust. It's cliche, but trust the process.
Yeah. Right. And have a good process in place to begin with, I think, is a big piece of that. Right.
Yep. Definitely.
That's great. So changing topics a little bit, tell me more about your journey as a parent now with Karis and Des and their sporting achievements, and kind of what you've gone through from the parent perspective.
So from a parent perspective, it's been really interesting. My kids have far exceeded any, when they're in the nursery as a kid, you're like, oh, I hope they grow up and, play sports and do well. And my kids have exceeded that to this point right now. My daughter plays golf at a really high level. Used to play basketball and tennis and lacrosse. Had a traumatic brain injury that's kind of stopped her from playing the other sports, and have kept her in golf primarily. But fun all the way through, watching her, play basketball and lacrosse. And here I am, always trying to encourage kids to play multiple sports. And now I've got a child that really has to focus on one. And then, Des plays basketball and baseball, and dabbles in golf and tennis a little bit. His baseball team has been, he's 12 years old, and he's in another week, we're going to be leaving for Branson, Missouri for the Cal Ripken World Series. It'll be the second time his team's gone to the World Series.
Awesome.
And it's as no thanks to me. I think the biggest thing I try to do as a parent is stay out of the way. I try to let their coaches coach, and if I see things, I'll maybe go to the coach and say, hey, I'm struggling to get Des to keep his hands higher and hold his follow through, and maybe try to get those coaches to get in his ear about it. Karis, I can tell her a little bit easier. I can, I coach her in golf, so I can say, hey, you need to do this or this. But if I get to a point where I can't do that anymore because the line of coach and parent is blurred, but she has a swing coach that I'll call up, and they can figure it out.
Yeah.
But we try to be supportive. Try to tell them all the time that I love watching them play. I don't care about the outcomes. Their outcomes have been great, but that's not why you're out there. You're out there to have fun. You're out there to learn lessons. My hope in the sports that you play, I think basketball and golf are great life sports, that you learn a lot about basketball teamwork. In any work setting, you could be in a team, and you got to be really good at what you do, but then it's only as good as how the team operates. And in golf, it's just you, but you have all of these other obstacles that you have to be able to deal with. The wind, the weather, other people. So if you see me at a game, quite often I'm hiding, out in the outfield by myself. Or a basketball game, I might be at the top. I try not to have reactions because I don't want my kids to see reactions, positively or negatively. because I want them to play for them. I don't want them to play for me. So often I see kids that are, you know, they make a good play, and the first thing they're doing, they're looking at their parents.
Yeah.
I want them to play for them. I want that to be the joy for them.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so that's what I've really tried to do as a parent. I don't know if it doesn't work for everybody, but it kind of works for me.
Yeah. I think that's great. So you just gave me a good list of answers to kind of the question I normally would ask next, which is what worked well for you as a coach or a parent. And so the next one is what has not worked well for you? Like, what have you, where have you gotten off track and like had problems from the parent perspective?
Yeah. So I generally have figured out the harder one has been with my son. What I've learned over time is that I have to let 24 hours go by. And just kind of like, don't say anything when we get in the car, you know, don't try to be the coach. And then just try to ask him questions, you know, what happened here? And then he'll explain it from his perspective. Cause you know, maybe there's something that I missed. Maybe his coach was telling him to, you know, keep passing to the corner instead of throwing it cross court or whatever.
Right.
But I try to listen. I have to fight my inner coach to want to fix everything.
Yes.
I think my daughter's taught me that the most. It's like, you don't have to, sometimes I'm telling you things that happened and I don't need you to fix them. I just need you to listen.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that does not always work is when I give the coach's perspective, and I have to remember I'm a parent and I just have to listen. That's probably a hard one for me.
Yeah. It's hard to wear both hats and not speak out of the normal mode that you're in that sport specifically.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's tricky.
Yeah.
And I know, you know, it's one of the things I different parents have different perspectives on it, including my wife on it. I'm not always at every one of my kids' games, obviously because I'm coaching, but I think that's okay. Like, my parents weren't at every game that I ever played. They tried to, but they weren't there. And oftentimes I hear parents that are like, oh my gosh, I have to be there. Like, he doesn't play well unless I'm here, or whatever. Like, they have to be able to play for themselves. They're not playing for you. They're not your entertainment. They're doing it because it's something they enjoy.
Yeah.
So I think that's okay. It's funny, in golf, we get the opposite. We get parents that don't show up and they just let their kids play. And when the parents finally do show up, the kids will freak out and say that they played bad because their parents were there, and then their parents just disappear. And I will often go to them and say, it's okay for you to come and watch.
Yeah.
They need to figure that out, because there's always going to be people out there.
Right.
And you know, if you're thinking about playing at that like college level, you're going to want coaches to go and watch. And if you never have anybody watching you, then how are you going to be able to handle that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one of the things. Like, sometimes there's parents that want to be at every practice, they want to be at every game, and like, that doesn't necessarily help your child.
Right.
Like, they've got to do this, and they've got to be able to figure it out on their own. And encourage them to communicate with their coaches beyond a text or a thanks coach at the end.
Sure.
You know, ask questions.
Yeah. I think it's important to, especially as they progress in age and ability, like, develop some independence around the sport. And it's like, regardless of who's there watching, parents or college scouts or whatever, like, I am zoned in doing my thing, and I don't really care who else is there.
Yep.
I think that's a whole skill set in itself, for sure.
Definitely.
All right, I have a final round of questions for you. Kind of taking the big picture first, I guess. Thinking about the Dover Boys High School program.
Sure.
3 years from now, kind of vision you have. If we were having this conversation 3 years from now and you're looking back at today, what would you have accomplished to feel satisfied with your progress?
Oh boy. That's a great question. we've been banking for a long time that my son's class, which will be in 8th grade this year, so 3 years from now they'll be sophomores. So I'd hope we'd have a bunch of players ready and waiting to in the next year jump up to varsity. And hopefully we've kind of figured out our reserve and JV programs, and our varsity over the last couple of years has gotten better, and we're ready to make a run. I'm hoping there's a window of like 5 years we can make a little run in. I guess that's what it would be.
That's great.
And they need to get in after this conversation. We got to figure out getting that group in to work with you again this fall after they've done their baseball.
That would be great. Yeah, I know they are zoned in the baseball in the summertime, but yeah, they were a fun group last winter, so I'd love to do that again.
Yeah.
So with, I guess, that vision in mind, what are the dangers or obstacles in the way of really reaching that ready to make a run status?
I think it's just like the natural attrition that happens sometimes. If a kid doesn't go to the high school, they decide to go to prep school or something like that. If they, go all in on a sport like baseball or, football, sometimes we have that where kids are like, I'm just going to lift and get ready for football season.
Right.
So I guess that would be it. And then if they plateau, like if they don't work on their skill, because at every level, everybody's getting better. And I think the natural inclination is to just look around the gym and say, well, I'm better than so-and-so in the gym, but you're always preparing for the players that aren't in the gym.
Right.
The team not in there. You can't go a day without trying to get better in some way. And if that means like you got to go in and shoot, or you got to go into your basement and dribble, or you got to go, lift weights, or whatever it is, you got to find that time and do that.
Yeah.
You can't have a day that you're not getting better.
Yeah. How do you guys go about
I think that's it.
Measuring player progress, or, even evaluating players? Something I'm always interested in.
That's probably something we could get better at. I think that we have a lot of conversations as coaches, and then we try to be honest with the kids. Like, this is kind of where we see you right now. We see you, kind of in this role, but your handling and shooting have got to get better to have a larger role.
Yeah.
But we don't have anything, like we don't have a formal thought about that before, like, having a formal sheet with a, here's your player evaluation. Just always worried about you do that and then somebody holds on to that and then they put you on social media blast. Hey, coach, you thought I was this. Look what I am now. I know that's motivation, but I don't
Sure.
need the hate on social media. So
yeah, I'm always interested, like, how can we find a number metric to boil certain skills down to, so that it's like, all right, you're a 6, we need you to be an 8 by the season. Here's like really specific objectives that we can move toward, because it's always like you're saying, it's hard as a coach to like tie something down specifically for a player, but it's hard for the player to say, taking the vague coach eye test perspective, like we see you in this role, like, okay, how do I actually, step that forward, especially, thinking their off season work on their own, like what do I do is kind of the player question, to really move that skill set forward.
One of the things, I think that's one of the things that's, I hate to keep circling back to COVID, but before COVID, we would sit down at the end of seasons and really like talk with the kids about, these are the things that we need to see from you going forward.
Yeah.
And I think because we weren't allowed to have those meetings and such, we kind of got away from it. So we're looking to do more of that and just be, very clear about it. And I think those are the best conversations that we have, or when we can sit down with the kid, with the coaches, and just kind of say, here's where you're at. And here's where we need to see you work on. And more times than not, when we have those conversations, the kids get in and they get working.
Yeah. Right. Just simplify and clarify exactly what they need to do. It helps a lot.
Yep.
So circling back to the big vision of, preparing for the 5-year run, I guess is what I'm going to call it. What are the opportunities you see, like, this season to move you toward that?
So guys been working really hard this off season. I definitely have seen more commitment getting in the gym with us. I'm just trying to get that. It's got to be a little bit more when we're not in the gym.
Yeah.
And almost got hit by a golf ball there. And just need them to take more ownership of it.
Yeah.
And then probably the biggest skill that I'm seeing that we're missing is a skill of talking. And I don't know how we corner that market. Just like they have the knowledge, but then like the knowledge to then say like, I'm curling and I'm open. So like, pass me the ball.
Right.
So we've got guys curling and they're not saying anything. So the guy doesn't know to pass it to them.
Yeah.
So like that's where I'm going to spend my entire off season before December trying to figure out how can I get them to do this seemingly simple thing that all kids struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah. I often just tell players to narrate what they're doing. Kind of like you're describing, like just be a third party narrator. Like I am curling.
I use the, like, if you ever play with me, I never stop talking. And I can play with 4 guys I've never played with before. And the reason why we can be successful is because I'm going to talk the entire time.
Right. It's like you don't have to say anything really fancy or
nope. On your right.
Exactly.
Just kick it to me. And a lot of times I'm saying it, and the ball, I never touch the ball 3 or 4 possessions, but I'm hoping the next possession, if I keep doing that, I will.
Right. No, I think that's good.
Yep.
And then what is your biggest strength that you can leverage towards getting to that 5-year run?
Oh boy. I think my biggest strength is problem solving. It's gonna be problem solving. It's gonna be I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily a system coach. I'm going to try to do what's best for the players that I have and their skill set. Some coaches are definitely, hey, this is what we do, and we're going to get kids to do this. I just, it could be that we have a bunch of big guys and we can't play an open system the way that I might prefer to play.
Sure.
So my ability to problem solve is going to be key to that, I think.
That's great. All right. And then final question we'll finish off with. What advice would you give parents out there just looking across sport culture in general from your perspective? Like what would you tell parents that they should be thinking about or doing to help their players along the journey?
Oh boy, you're trying to get like the sneak peek of the book I want to write. More isn't always better. More is just more. I think you got to be like intentional with things. Like if you decide that if your child decides they want to play, then you got to be like, you got to make sure that they're doing things that are going to make them better, and don't just keep doing more and more and more. So like I'll see, somebody, my son wants to focus on basketball, so they're going to do the skill sessions and they're going to play on like 2 AAU teams and they're going to come to all the open gyms, and that's going to make them better. And it's like you all that is great. That's just more basketball, but it may have the unintentional consequence of not making it enjoyable for the kid. It may not necessarily make them better if what they need to work on and the skills they're trying to work through, if they don't match up, then I see kids that play a lot of the AAU and didn't do any of the skill stuff. And they don't understand. They played 60 games, but they're not really any better. But you weren't really intentional with what your practice was going to be.
Right.
So again, more wasn't better. More was just more.
Yeah. I think
and I see that across sports.
Yeah. I think the difference between activity and impact is really how I describe that, right? Like we're doing a lot of volume of activity, but the pressure's high to win, so I can't really try anything new or really progress because I gotta hit the shots I'm already good at, or I gotta give it up to the better player that is gonna hit the shots so we can win the game. And like I'm not really progressing at all in that environment.
Yeah, and you got to be intentional with working on your weaknesses. See too many kids working on their strengths. I'm a pretty decent shooter, so I'm just going to keep shooting. It's like, yeah, but you can't shoot off the dribble.
Right.
So when I was playing, I was not the best player, but I was always trying to add those skills like I was the best player.
Yeah.
So one of the players I used to love watching growing up was Glenn Rice, and his footwork was amazing. Like he was the first guy that I saw that was using post moves out around the elbow.
Yeah.
So he would catch and drop step and do things from the elbow. And I was like, gosh, I wonder if I could do some of that stuff. Like, if I caught it on the 3-point line and I was able to, Sigma move and then kind of go from there.
Right.
And like, I just don't see that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see more of that.
Cool. Well, that's great. Appreciate your time, Matt. It's great to hear your journey on all three fronts as a player yourself, as a coach, and as a parent. You got the trifecta going on over there.
Yeah, it was fun, BJ. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
All right.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Bye.